This week we're looking at one of the greatest comedies ever made, a landmark achievement in the history of movies. It's a rare, perfect storm of writing, directing, and acting that changed the landscape of Hollywood forever. It's silly, stupid, and smart all at the same time. And when it was released, critics and audiences were completely baffled by it. I'm talking, of course, about the 1979 movie, The Jerk. If you've never seen it, The Jerk tells the story of Navin R. Johnson, a white guy raised by a poor black family in Mississippi. Navin has no idea he's white until one day his mom lets slip that she wasn't actually his real mother. With that bombshell dropped, Navin decides to embark on a journey to St. Louis to find his real parents and make something of himself. Along the way, he gets into all kinds of ridiculous hijinks. He gets his first job at a gas station, where he invents a pair of glasses that clip onto your shirt to keep them from falling down. He gets swindled into a carnival sideshow where he pretends to be incredibly strong, and he even accidentally creates a self-help craze after people misinterpret some comments he makes while testifying in court. All the while, he's searching for his biological parents, though he has no idea what either of them look like. In fact, the whole setup of the movie is a riff on the old joke that goes, "How do you find your biological parents? You look for someone that looks nothing like you, and that's basically it." The entire plot revolves around this absurd premise, which is funny enough on its own. But the beauty of the movie is how everything else builds off of this initial joke. We're meant to believe Navin is actually related to none of the other characters in the movie. That's why nobody looks like him. As a kid, I remember watching this movie and being utterly confused by the ending. Spoiler alert, Navin eventually finds his birth parents, a wealthy couple who treat him like a bastard and then die in a hot air balloon accident. And suddenly, just like that, Navin is back to being an unloved orphan again. I didn't understand why the movie would end like that after setting up such a ridiculous premise. But as an adult, I now understand the point. By making Navin's situation so dire, the movie is able to satirize the American dream. Despite working hard and trying his best, Navin can never really get ahead because he's starting from behind. But maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe it's just a dumb comedy. I mean, there's a scene where Navin pees in a jar to prove he is uncarrying any contraband into a boxing match. And it takes two guys to lift him up to the rafters of the building because he pissed so much. So yeah, maybe it's a little bit dumb. So why is it considered one of the greatest comedies ever made? Well, it's because of the main character. Navin R. Johnson is one of the funniest characters ever put on film, partly because of how absurd he is, and partly because of how earnestly played by Steve Martin. The first time I saw this movie, I already knew who Steve Martin was, but watching The Jerk, it became clear to me why he was so famous. Throughout the movie, he makes one goofy face after another. At one point, he opens his mouth so wide while pretending to be strong that his eyes pop right out of his sockets. And it's the commitment to these kinds of gags that makes them so funny. Nobody in the history of Hollywood could sell these jokes the way Steve Martin does. There's a scene where Navin gets roped into being the muscle for a mobster named Bruno, and he tries to intimidate a businessman by grabbing him by the lapels and yelling in his face. But he's so incompetent that he ends up accidentally tickling the guy instead. This scene is pure slapstick gold. And it wouldn't work nearly as well if it wasn't played completely straight. What's most impressive about it is that there's almost no dialogue at all. Most of it is just physical comedy. Now, physical comedy is a tough thing to pull off, especially in modern times. Just think about any recent movie you've seen that tried to use slapstick humor. It usually comes off as forced, awkward, and frankly, unfunny. But with The Jerk, every single gag lands, because Steve Martin had a real gift for timing. Part of the reason for this is that the movie never feels rushed. Some of the scenes go on for several minutes, simply letting Martin's physical comedy play out before moving on to the next joke. Take, for example, the infamous library scene where Navin walks in and accidentally breaks a bunch of glasses. The joke isn't particularly clever. In fact, you can probably guess what's going to happen the moment he walks through the door. But the way it plays out is absolutely genius. First, we see Navin struggling to open the door while holding a stack of books. Then he finally gets inside and promptly bumps into a glass display case. From there, things just spiral into chaos. Glass shards fall onto books, more books hit more glass, and suddenly the entire library is in shambles. What makes the scene so funny isn't the fact that he breaks a bunch of stuff, it's the total incompetence with which he does it. There's a strange kind of beauty to the scene, like watching a house of cards slowly crumble or a Jenga tower finally collapse. You know what's coming, but you still can't help but watch as everything comes crashing down around him. It's so well shot and edited that you're actually rooting for Navin to succeed, even though you know he's gonna fail. And when he does, the payoff is so satisfyingly silly that you can't help but laugh. It's hard to overstate how influential The Jerk was when it came out. For the first time, a mainstream comedy was unapologetically absurd. Before this, Hollywood comedies relied on witty banter, romance, or satire to get their laughs. But here was a movie that made no effort to hide its utter stupidity, and that was refreshing. Here was a movie that didn't try to pretend it was anything other than what it was, a dumb comedy. Now, if you're a comedy nerd like me, You might be wondering why The Jerk has aged as well as some of the other movies on this list. And to be honest, it's probably because of the supporting cast. All of the actors playing prominent roles are pretty bad, the best example being Burgess Meredith, who plays Bruno, the mobster I mentioned earlier. Bruno is supposed to be an intimidating gangster, but Meredith sells the role about as well as a Power Ranger. Every time he shows up on screen, the tone of the movie shifts to something that can only be described as camp. Now, in fairness to Meredith, I don't think he was playing it straight. The problem is that the rest of the cast weren't good enough to carry the movie. If everyone was playing it as silly as Burgess Meredith was, The Jerk would be even funnier than it is today. As it stands, the movie relies almost entirely on Steve Martin's shoulders. And thankfully, he was more than capable of carrying a movie on his own. The Jerk is funny, ridiculous, and weird. It's everything I want out of a comedy, and while it may not be the best movie ever made, it's definitely in my top 10 favorite movies.